Hello, and welcome to episode 8 of Quizzing Cameron, where I take your management and leadership questions and put my practical and straightforward spin on answers for you. You're not going to get any sort of jargon, theory, buzzwords here, just simple and practical advice that you can put into practice. So if you have any questions for me, you can drop down to the replies and go ahead and ask the question there, and I'll get to those in a future episode. I've got a full slate today, so we're going to go ahead and dive right in. Our first question comes from Kirstien, is how do you handle the close friends that try to drag you down when you get a promotion to oversee them? And Kirstien, congratulations on your promotion, first and foremost. It's a difficult balance being the friend and the boss. And in the workplace, because we spend so much time with people, naturally we're going to develop friendships with them. And it really is not an art form, but it's a personality trait that you need to develop, and that is when is the time to be a friend and when is the time to be a boss. And you may, depending on your ability to juggle those two, have to fall on one side or the other. And what I mean by that is you need to be able to do your job. First and foremost, your priority as the leader of a department is to do your job. And if you can go ahead and be friends with a particular person, whether that be outside of work, whether that be inside of work, then absolutely great. But you can't show any sort of favoritism or even the illusion of any favoritism. And for those people that used to be your friends, and I'll say used to be, who are trying to drag you down, they have to make the same sort of juggling. It's a two-way street on that. And so your friends need to be okay that sometimes you're going to be their boss. And they need to either leave work at work if you are friends outside of it, or you're going to have a struggle being friends with them, and you have to make a decision whether you want to continue to be the leader and be their boss, or whether you need to actually move to something else where you can still accommodate that friendship, and whether that's a lateral move or whether that's moving back down to an hourly situation. That's the hard decision that you have to make. And for me personally, I'm very sociable, very friendly, and people that couldn't handle that situation where I had to be their boss, and then 3 hours later we're at a social gathering and we're both there, I had to let those people go for the sake of my career and how I was providing for my family and those sorts of things. And not all people can make that decision, and not all people want to make that decision, and that's perfectly fine. But you have to be willing to do that. You can be boss, you can be friend, or you can be both, but that takes a two-way street for those people. So unfortunately, my advice to you, Kirstien, is that you have to make that choice as to either let those friends go and continue to be the boss, or look for something else where you can maintain that friendship that's, I'm sure, so important to you. My best wishes on figuring that out, but that was an absolutely great question, and one that I'm sure all of us deal with regularly. Our next question comes from Irfanullah, and it is, what do you do when the boss feels insecure and is not presenting your achievements to executives? It's a tough spot, and there's two ways to handle this, and not two ways to handle it, but there's two situations that you run into, and that is you have access to your boss's boss, or you don't have access to your boss's boss. Now, if you are being brought into the same meetings that your leader is in and is presenting your ideas in those meetings, you can try to chime in. And at opportune times. I'm sure you're not necessarily being allowed. Those leaders that steal those ideas and take them for their own are not ethical and are usually figuring out how to maneuver a situation for their benefit. So those don't always present themselves. The other way to do that, and it starts getting very risky at this point, but you need to make some hard decisions if you want credit for your work. The other way to do that is actually to hold something back from your leader. So they present the idea, they throw it out there, and then you actually chime in at the end and say something along the lines of, oh, I'm sorry, I forgot to actually include this piece as well. And it can be something relatively small, something not important, but that lets everybody in the room know that you were involved in this particular project, in this particular discussion. Again, you have to be very careful with that because your leader is not necessarily going to be interested in that, and you may face some pushback once you leave that particular meeting. The other way is if you have a situation where you don't have any access to their boss. And what I always recommend there is that you leverage vacations. Your leader hopefully takes vacations, and that's your time to really shine from their superior's perspective. You have 1 week, you have 2 weeks a year where you can really put your best foot forward. So you make sure that you've cleaned your slate, cleaned your calendar up, that you're ready to go, and you're ready to be of use for their boss's boss and jump in and help out. Even if your leader has selected somebody else to take over for them, you can still shine in those particular moments. I don't recommend going to the boss, their boss's boss, your boss's boss, without your leader there. That's really jumping the food chain in the hierarchy, and it can look very aggressive from your boss's standpoint, but even from their boss's standpoint, it can look like you're superseding the hierarchy and not really following procedures. So that one's a little bit dicey. I did want to throw one last one in, and that is that you can be a resource to peers, your boss's peers, and you can really be the expert in your particular area. You can offer your services, again, a small amount, and with your boss's approval, but you can also kind of look to branch out and choose a different ladder if you're not getting the exposure in the career ladder that you're on. So that's my last little bit of advice. Best of luck to you. Our third question today comes from Heather, and it is, how do you motivate people in times of change when workloads are unsustainable, morale is low? On the contrary, how does an employee keep management engaged during these hard times? And Heather, I really appreciate that second part, because it is in times of change and in times of stress, Christmas in retail, it doesn't even have to be change, it can just be an extraordinarily busy time. Everybody gets strained, and so I'm going to tackle the second question first, and that is, how are you supportive to your boss? And it's important. They are just as strained, if not even more so, than the employees, because they have to manage all of this, and they're ultimately responsible for it. And so what I recommend is actually offering to help them out. In particular cases where you might have a moment of free time, ask them if there's anything that you can do to help. Just having that support. Odds are they're going to want you to go back and tackle the next thing that's on your plate, but even just having that support. And then what you want to do is also feed back to them things that are going well. Odds are in times of change in particular, they are getting a steady diet of the negative. They aren't hearing about anything that's going right, they're hearing about all of the problems that they need to solve. So if you can feed your leader some of the positive things that are going on and some of the successes, that does a lot to break up their day and the stress that they're under and give them a little ray of sunshine so that they can be better leaders for you. Now, as far as motivating the people when you're the leader going through this time of change, you have to set up breaks and you have to set up ways to kind of de-stress, is how I say it. So it might be just milestone parties. I keep coming back to my retail experience in the holidays, and that was on Monday following the busy weekend at the Christmas time. We would get together and have a party. You know, it was a meeting, kind of letting everybody know what was going on, but we'd bring in pizza and that sort of thing, and just detox for a moment and celebrate that we made it through one more week. But you can do that through any sort of change management. We reach a certain threshold or a certain date in the project that's going on, and we have some sort of de-stressing time. And there's ways to do that without spending any money. You can Google all of those team building activities, that sort of thing. But just taking that little break lets off a lot of the pressure. Just like any sort of pressure valve, you just kind of let off a little bit of steam with it, and that helps get through the entire project. And it can really be that these incredibly stressful times bring the team together. So focus on the togetherness, that everybody's in it together, that we're going to get through it together. Start talking team more. That's a great benefit of the tough times, is that good teams come together, and if you're out there promoting teamwork and togetherness, that's a way for everybody to kind of help carry each other's burdens just a little bit. And the last thing is to show the progress, especially when you're doing some sort of change management, bringing in a new system, a new way of doing things. You have to show the progress and you have to show the successes. Everybody's going to have it in their minds that it's not working out, that the old way of doing things was better and it's more efficient. And it is. To start out with, the old way is almost always more efficient. but you have to show that over time the new way is actually showing progress and is actually showing the positives. So you have to do a little bit of PR work on the positives in any sort of project management change. Our next question comes from Lorraine, and it's, how do you expect employees to respect new management when the new CEO barely speaks English and promotes 2 receptionists to management? Lorraine, thank you, and this proves that I will answer every single question that comes at me, because this one's a tough one. Quite frankly, you don't respect that leader. You can't. They completely failed at communication, and it's not because they don't speak English. It's because they have not explained the why for their promotion decisions. And it's not that those people are receptionists, it's that they need to explain why they're making the decisions that they're making. So this leader lacks in communication, so that makes it hard for you to respect them. Yes, you need to respect their position. Obviously, if you are employed by them, you have a duty to respect their decisions. But this is a boss that isn't helping you out as far as a respect standpoint goes. They need to explain the decisions that they're in, and clearly they're not in this particular case. Now, I will make a caveat on this as far as receptionists are concerned and executive assistants. In my experience, these individuals do a whole heck of a lot more than everybody gives them credit for. Everybody thinks they're just making copies, answering phones, passing along messages, but they're oftentimes given an extraordinary amount of responsibility as far as putting together presentations, projects, following up on things for the leader. The receptionist position, depending on which company you're in, can have more control than executive positions in the company and more far-reaching understanding of what goes on. And you brought up a very important point. There was a little bit more to this question in regards, and I think it's a healthcare related area that we're speaking of, as far as clerical and clinical. And your clinical expertise is great in a particular subset, but just because you are great in a clinical area doesn't mean that you're necessarily great in a leadership, and you're actually handicapped to a certain extent because you're not given the exposure for leadership capabilities in a clinical area or an area of exceptional expertise. And so that's oftentimes why that sort of leapfrogging of you and others into leadership positions takes place, is because people think of you more as an expert in a particular area. And so that may be a challenge for you to kind of expose the areas of leadership that you might have and expose those to the COO so that next time you get the promotion. Lorraine, that was a great question. Thank you. Our last question today comes from Denise, and it is, how do you manage fear through a merger? And Denise, mergers and acquisitions are going crazy right now, especially in the last 6 months. Anybody who pays attention to CNBC would notice that. But what I always recommend is that when you're in a state of fear, oftentimes it is fear of the unknown. In this case, a merger. Am I going to be employed 6 months from now? So what you want to do is you want to get real with the situation, and you want to start taking action. You get real in a situation because in this case, you don't know what's going to happen. In a particular merger, any number of things can happen, and some of them make sense, some of them don't make sense, some of them see it coming, some of them don't see it coming, that sort of thing. So what you want to do in the case of a merger is you want to put your best foot forward, and you want to be helpful. This is not the time to defensively get into the way that things are. You want to be helpful to the new leadership, try to give them an understanding of what was going on, and put your best foot forward. That's the only thing you can do to secure your job in the merger and to help your department out. So be ready to do that. Be ready. Don't get disgruntled, that sort of thing. Be defensive, cower away in a hole and wait to get let go. Put your best foot forward, and that will bring as much value to the attention of the new leadership as possible, so hopefully you'll survive this merger. The next thing that you want to do is you want to take action as much as possible. Doing your best, being helpful, those are things that take action. Those are things that start clearing away the clouds of uncertainty. But you want to, in this case, there's a reality that even if you do that, you're not going to survive. Your department may be completely duplicative in the new structure, and so you may not survive. So you want to gain the experience that you can. You want to fill in your resume holes if you have any. If you haven't created a training program, now's the time to create a training program. If you know, haven't been keeping up on your one-on-ones, now's the time to keep up on your one-on-ones with your team. You want to put your best foot forward for your future boss, as well as the current boss that just came in. Mergers are tough, but mergers are something that we all deal with at one time or another. Do your best, be helpful to the new leadership, but also be real with it, take care of yourself, and now's the time to really focus on polishing up your resume. Ugh, I hate to be defeatist like that, but it's great from a leadership perspective anyways to do that training program and to make sure you're on top of your one-on-one. So get your ducks in a row, and I wish you the best of luck, Denise. I hope this works out well for you. Well, that's it for today for Quizzing Cameron. Again, if you have any questions, drop those down into the replies. I'll go ahead and put them in the queue to be answered. And from sunny Las Vegas, I'm signing off. Have a good one.